The story begins in Dresden, Germany, in the 1950s, a city still scarred by war's aftermath. Among its fractured streets, Harald and Dagmar Alexander found solace in a small, insular religious cult called the Rebirth Society. The group followed a self-proclaimed prophet, Father Elias, whose voice they believed carried divine authority. He preached of purification and rebirth, warning of a coming reckoning. When Father Elias died unexpectedly, the group was thrown into chaos. But Harald stepped forward, claiming to have inherited Elias's mantle through a vision. Declaring himself the new voice of God, Harald transformed the society's teachings into something darker. He preached of a sacred cleansing and spoke cryptically of an unseen figure called the Witness, said to be watching and judging their devotion. What began as a search for faith spiraled into a fanatical obsession, setting the stage for the horrors that would soon follow.
Hi there, I'm Daniel, and welcome to Darkly Wired. Today's case takes us deep into the disturbing story of Harald Alexander and the legacy of the Rebirth Society. It's a tale steeped in emotional, mental, and spiritual abuse, escalating into murder under the guise of divine purpose. Along the way, allegations of infidelity and systemic failures in law enforcement paint a horror picture. Though the case has long been closed, unanswered questions continue to cast a dark shadow over the official narrative. In 1954, Harald and Dagmar's second child, Frank, was born. Almost immediately, Harald declared that Frank was not just a boy, but the voice of God on earth. Every word Frank spoke was considered divine law, a decree that even his older sister Marina and younger twin sisters, Sabine and Petra, were compelled to follow. At first, Frank's commands were innocuous, reflecting the simple thoughts of a young child. He demanded longer playtimes, fewer chores, and extra sweets at dinner. The family indulged him, treating these whims as divine revelations. But as Frank grew older, his words became tinged with an eerie authority. He began to issue decrees about their daily lives, what they could wear, what they could eat, and even how they should pray. By the time Frank was a teenager, his proclamations had grown sinister. He declared that their family's purity could only be maintained through isolation and absolute obedience. Outsiders were deemed unclean, and contact with them was strictly forbidden. Harald, ever loyal to his son's divinity, enforced these rules with an iron hand, isolating the family from the world. Frank's commands escalated further. He began to speak of sacred rituals that involved physical and emotional control over his sisters. Marina, Sabine, and Petra, bound by their belief in Frank's divine role, submitted without question. The lines between faith and abuse blurred until they were indistinguishable. Dagmar, too, became complicit, believing her submission was a path to salvation. The family's neighbors began to notice strange behavior. The Alexanders rarely left their home, and when they did, they avoided eye contact and spoke in hushed tones. At night, organ music would echo from the house, a haunting, almost hypnotic melody played by Harald as a form of worship. Rumors swirled about the family's peculiar ways, but no one dared to intervene. By the time Frank reached adulthood, he had consolidated complete control over the family. His decrees were no longer questioned, they were gospel. What had started as a seemingly harmless belief in a child's special nature had morphed into an unexpected reign of terror within the Alexander home. And so, the stage was set for a tragedy that would shock even the most hardened investigators. As rumors spread in Dresden about the Alexanders' strange practices, the family fled to the Canary Islands. It was a calculated move, away from prying eyes and persistent whispers. In their new home, they lived an isolated life, shrouded in secrecy. Neighbors only knew them for the eerie organ music that echoed from their apartment at all hours, a haunting, discordant symphony that seemed to seep into the walls of the building, unsettling everyone who heard it. Behind those closed doors, however, the family's delusions grew ever more extreme. Harald, once the self-proclaimed inheritor of the prophet's mantle, now fully abdicated his authority to Frank. It was Frank who decided when they ate, when they slept, and even how they spoke to one another. He introduced new rituals that he claimed were revelations from God, rituals that blurred the lines between devotion and cruelty. One such ritual involved prolonged periods of fasting and prayer, during which the family would kneel in a circle around Frank while he recited passages he claimed were divine scripture. These sessions would often last for hours, with no breaks, until one of the family members fainted from exhaustion. When this happened, Frank would chastise them, declaring their weakness a sin that needed to be purged. The isolation began to warp their perception of reality. Marina, the eldest sister, started to hear whispers in the organ music at night, a low, droning voice that seemed to call her name. Petra and Sabine, the twins, became increasingly withdrawn, communicating only in fragmented sentences and secret glances. Dagmar, once the stabilizing force of the family, began to show signs of severe paranoia. She would spend hours pacing the apartment, muttering prayers under her breath and clutching a worn Bible as if it were a shield. But the most chilling development came when Frank decreed that their isolation was not enough. "God demands purity," he announced one evening, his voice calm but resolute. "And purity can only be achieved through sacrifice." The family's compliance was immediate and unquestioning. They began to purge their lives of anything they deemed impure: books, photographs, even personal belongings that reminded them of their life in Dresden. By the end of it, the apartment was stripped bare, save for a few pieces of furniture and the organ that Harald continued to play with an almost manic fervor. As the weeks turned into months, the Alexander family drifted further from reality. Their world became a closed loop of ritual, fear, and control, with Frank at its center. And while the neighbors in the Canary Islands dismissed them as odd but harmless, they had no idea of the storm that was brewing behind those shuttered windows. On December 22, 1970, Sabine was working at a local villa as a cook. That evening, her father Harald and brother Frank arrived at her workplace, their faces pale and clothes smeared with what appeared to be mud. But as they approached, the metallic smell revealed the truth: it was blood. Harald's eyes gleamed with an unsettling calm, and Frank's face was eerily blank, devoid of any emotion. Their chilling words would haunt anyone who heard them. "Sabine dear, we wanted you to know that Frank and I have just finished killing your mother and your sisters." The air seemed to freeze in that moment. Sabine didn't scream. She didn't run. Instead, she grasped her father's bloodied hands with a serenity that defied comprehension and said, "I'm sure you've done what was necessary." Her calm acceptance wasn't just chilling, it was deeply unsettling. To the villa's owner, a respected doctor who had overheard the exchange, it was as if he were witnessing something otherworldly, something deeply unnatural. Harald turned to the doctor, his tone conversational, almost polite. "Ah, you've overheard. We've killed my wife and other daughters." It was the hour of killing. The phrase, "the hour of killing," seemed rehearsed, as if it were part of a ritual known only to the family. The doctor's mind raced, torn between disbelief and the stark reality of the blood staining their clothes. He could feel the weight of their presence, the oppressive certainty that these were not men who regretted their actions. Desperate to maintain his composure, the doctor invited the remaining Alexanders to wait on his front patio. As they stood there, Harald began humming a hymn, his voice low and steady, while Frank simply stared into the distance, his lips moving in silent prayer. It was as if they were performing a macabre act of worship, their crime a sacrament. Inside, the doctor's hands trembled as he dialed the police, his voice barely steady enough to relay what he'd just witnessed. When authorities arrived, they found Harald and Frank waiting calmly, as if they expected this all along. "We've sent them to God," Frank said, his voice devoid of remorse. "Now it's their turn to judge us." What the police would later uncover in the Alexanders' apartment would shake even the most seasoned investigators to their core. When authorities entered the Alexanders' apartment, they encountered a scene straight out of a nightmare. Marina, Petra, and Dagmar's bodies lay in grotesque disarray, their faces unrecognizable beneath the violence inflicted upon them. Blood painted the walls in chaotic streaks, pooling in corners as if it had seeped into the foundation of the home itself. The air reeked of iron and decay, a scent so thick it seemed to cling to the skin of those who stepped inside. The officers' flashlights revealed what they initially thought were strange decorations on the walls, but horror set in as they realized the truth. The victims' organs had been deliberately removed and displayed like macabre trophies. Harald's organ stood ominously in the corner, a silent witness to the carnage. Sheet music, spattered with blood, rested on its stand, as if it had been part of some grotesque ritual. Harald later explained his actions with unsettling calm. "The music was their guide," he said, his voice devoid of remorse. "Each note was a hymn for their souls, a passage to divine purity. Frank, equally detached, claimed the mutilations were necessary to release the darkness within their bodies, ensuring their ascension. The investigators couldn't shake the eerie feeling that the apartment itself was alive, as if it had absorbed the madness and horror of the night. One officer reportedly fled the scene, unable to endure the overwhelming dread that seemed to seep from every bloodied surface. The Alexander's explanation left more questions than answers, cementing the scene as one of the most horrifying and perplexing crimes the authorities had ever encountered. Under questioning, Frank recounted the events with an eerie detachment, his words sharp and deliberate. He claimed his mother, Dagmar, was the first to die because she looked at him wrong, elaborating that her gaze wasn't merely disapproving, it was accusatory, almost conspiratorial, as if she knew his intentions before he did. He described the moment as an unspoken agreement, a silent nod to destiny, where her eyes seemed to plead and condemn in equal measure. Harald, on the other hand, painted a surreal picture, speaking with fervor about what he called the hour of divine reckoning. According to him, Frank had foretold this moment for years, describing it as a celestial command only they could interpret. He claimed the women weren't just passive participants but willing collaborators, their roles ordained by something far greater than themselves. Harald insisted that Dagmar, in her final moments, whispered a prayer of acceptance, a detail investigators found no evidence of but one Harald recited verbatim with unsettling precision. Then came the twist. Frank revealed that Dagmar had left a diary, cryptically documenting dreams of fire and judgment, her entries aligning eerily with his prophecies. The investigators found no such diary, but Frank's insistence on its existence unnerved them, as if it had been erased not by the killers, but by the women themselves, determined to protect a secret even in death. Harald's chilling final remark echoed in the room. They didn't die in fear, they ascended in purpose. We were their guides, nothing more. Investigators sifted through the scattered remnants of journals and letters, each piece revealing a tapestry of years soaked in manipulation and psychological torment. Dagmar's entries, in particular, were laced with cryptic phrases, visions of the inevitable reckoning, and references to the sacred order, hinting at an unwavering belief that the killings were part of a divine calling. Yet, as they pieced together the fragments, disturbing inconsistencies began to emerge. The most glaring anomaly was Sabine, the sole survivor. Her calm reaction in the aftermath of the killings was unsettling. While one might expect shock, confusion, or at least grief, Sabine was eerily composed, almost serene, as if the deaths hadn't shattered her world but fulfilled a long-awaited purpose. Was she merely a witness to the horrors, a victim of the same psychological conditioning, or had she been an active participant, biding her time until the perfect moment to strike? The investigators couldn't shake the suspicion that Sabine's calmness hid something darker, a knowledge of the events far beyond that of an innocent bystander. Could she have masterminded the murders alongside Frank and Harald? Then, there was the mystery of the witness, the figure mentioned in Dagmar's final diary entry. The cryptic words, "They will never find the witness, but they will find the truth through me," sent a shiver down the spines of the investigators. Dagmar had written this hours before her death, as if she knew she was being watched, though by whom? Searches through the house revealed no trace of this mysterious individual. No one could recall a person fitting the description Dagmar alluded to. But in an unexpected twist, a name surfaced from a forgotten part of the family's history. Ingrid, a distant relative who had disappeared years ago under strange circumstances. The connection to the witness was speculative, yet the unsettling possibility lingered that Ingrid had returned, somehow involved in the events, watching them unfold from the shadows. As the investigators delved deeper, they discovered a peculiar detail in the family's financial records, a series of large unexplained transactions to an overseas account. The beneficiary? A name they had never heard of, the witness. A code name? A fake identity? The more they uncovered, the more tangled the web became. Was the witness a person of power, manipulating events from afar, or was the term symbolic, referring to a force beyond human reach? As they pursued each lead, a chilling thought settled in the investigators' minds. What if the real truth lay not in the killings themselves, but in the unseen hand orchestrating everything from the beginning? In the aftermath of the horrifying murders, Harald and Frank were declared unfit for trial, their minds fractured beyond repair. Both were committed to psychiatric institutions, their once confident demeanors now replaced by shattered fragments of delusions. Frank, once a prophetic figure, became an incoherent shell of his former self, muttering about the hour of reckoning and the ascension of the chosen. Harald, the seemingly loyal accomplice, spoke of visions and voices that no one else could hear, claiming he was guided by something older than time itself. Medical professionals were baffled, unable to pinpoint the exact nature of their shared psychosis. Some speculated it was hereditary madness, others suggested a sinister, undiagnosed condition. Whatever the cause, they were locked away, their fate sealed, but the mystery of the killings lingered like a dark cloud over the case. Meanwhile, Sabine vanished without a trace. After the killings, she had shown no outward signs of remorse or trauma, her reaction to the chaos cold and calculated. In the months following the investigation, she changed her name, erased her past, and seemingly disappeared from the public eye. Rumors circulated that she had joined a reclusive coven, one that practiced ancient rites and rituals known only to a select few. Some believed she had found solace in a new family of sorts, one that not only accepted her actions but may have even encouraged them. A few whispers surfaced, claiming that Sabine had become a leader within this mysterious group, using her calm and calculated demeanor to manipulate others into their own dark agendas. But nothing concrete emerged, no records, no sightings. She had become a ghost, fading into the shadows of the unknown. Then there was the phrase that echoed long after the case had gone cold. The witness knows. It had been the last line in Dagmar's final journal entry, written hours before her death, a haunting phrase that refused to fade from the minds of those who had investigated the case. Every attempt to trace the origin of the witness led to dead ends, yet the phrase lingered in the minds of the surviving family members, the investigators, and even the psychiatric staff who tended to Harald and Frank. Was the witness real, or was it a figment of their shared delusion? And if it was real, who, or what were they? The Alexander family's descent into darkness is a harrowing exploration of the fragile line between faith and fanaticism. At what point does belief become weaponized, morphing into something capable of overriding morality and humanity itself? Were they simply victims of a shared psychosis, minds fractured by years of manipulation and isolation? Or was there an unseen force driving them, something darker than madness alone? The question that lingers, unanswered, is whether their crimes were entirely their own. The hour of killing, a phrase that Frank spoke of with chilling certainty, was not a spontaneous act. It was a culmination, the end of a timeline meticulously planned within their twisted reality. But where did that certainty come from? Did they convince themselves of divine command, or were they pawns in a larger sinister design we may never fully comprehend? Even now, the idea of the witness haunts the narrative like a shadow. Was it a person? A metaphor? Or something beyond human understanding? If this figure existed, did they act as an observer or an instigator? And more disturbingly, are they still watching, waiting for another hour of reckoning to unfold? The answers, if they exist, remain shrouded in mystery, locked away with the minds of Harald and Frank, and perhaps with Sabine, who vanished like a ghost into the ether. What do you think? Were the Alexanders prisoners of their delusions, or were their actions influenced by something we dare not name? Could the witness hold the key to unlocking this dark tale, or is it just another layer of their madness? Thank you so much for watching, and a special shout out to everyone who watched to the end. Your support means the world. I'm Daniel, and this is Darkly Wired. Remember, our stories here remind us how deep the search for truth can go, and your engagement helps bring them to light. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss when we dive into the next story. New videos are posted every day. Until next time, stay curious, stay questioning, and remember, the most terrifying truths aren't hiding in the shadows. They're right in front of us, waiting for the moment we're brave enough to truly see them.